they're doing to create resilient students, institutions, and communities, and also meet regional workforce needs. We know that community colleges are extremely important in situations where there are disasters, whether natural or man-made. And all of the 7 community colleges in the Northeast Resiliency Consortium have experienced and responded to disasters in recent years. From Atlantic Cape Community College, we have Donna Vassallo, Dean of Career Education. From LaGuardia Community College, we have Francesca Fiore, Assistant Dean for Workforce Development and Business Services. And from Atlantic Cape Community College, we have Sherwood Taylor, who is the Director of Workforce Development. An excellent panel. So, in terms of how this session will be set up today, we shared a little bit about the Northeast Resiliency Consortium and gave just a taste about a resiliency competency model that the consortium has developed with the support of employers and community college administrators, faculty, staff, and students. Our college representatives will give some context about the work that they're doing to engage employers and focusing on how they are meeting these regional workforce needs. Then we're going to go into a short panel presentation, and then we will have an activity in time for questions and answers. Okay? And I'm curious, we have a big room and a lot of people who are interested in this topic. So I'm curious if a few of you could raise your hands and just say why you're interested in this topic. What drew you to today's session? Around the room? All right, up front. A willing person? Let's see. All right, in the back. Great.
I just returned from an academic mindset summit that the Tennessee Board of Regents did, so this looks like it's right in that same wheelhouse.
Oh, sure is, sure is. And which college are you from?
Rhodes State Community College, Resiliency, New York.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Anybody else? So academic mindset was one. Yes?
I just was hired at Big Bend Community College in Washington State, and I'm an administrative assistant for a brand new program called New Opportunities in Aviation Unmanned Aerial Systems program, which is basically a drone program.
Hello.
And our community is very agricultural focused, and so we're hoping that we're going to partner with local farmers and agricultural industry. So
Oh wow, that's exciting. So a new drone program at Big Bend Community College. Anybody else? Good, so we have lots of folks interested for different reasons and also focus on topics such as academic mindset and engaging new employers in a brand new program. Good. So the first presentation today will come from Atlantic Cape Community College.
I have to come closer. So good afternoon, everyone. As the Director of Workforce Development, so my comments are going to be based on our NRC programs, but across Atlantic Cape, we have employer engagement as a really important part of what we do. So the first thing I want to just address is, in 2012, we had a switch from calling our area continuing education to workforce development. That was done for a couple of reasons. One, the employer base and primarily the healthcare industry that we deal with identified really more with the workforce development tag than they did with the continuing education tag. And the workforce development tag kind of approached them with the result of getting results for what they're actually looking for. So we made that switch in 2012, hence my title, Director of Workforce Development, and we've been moving forward with that ever since. We have a single source access under the Workforce Development development model. So some of your community colleges probably have folks that sell over here, and we have workforce development folks that want employers engaged in helping with curriculum and, most importantly, placing our students in clinicals and internships and externships. So what we do is we have a single access model. If there's a contract that needs to be sold, I can do that, or my counterpart can do that. And when we talk about collaboration and getting employers involved in curriculum, I also do that as well. So it's not if an employer from healthcare calls and says, look, we're looking for training in X, Y, and Z, I have to transfer them to someone. I can handle that for them, so that does help with keeping that person engaged and really connected to us. And multiple disciplines. So in a lot of community college or organizations, and really based on how your organization is set up, what we call Title II or the Adult Basic Ed function reports to another director or another dean. That reports to me. I report to an academic dean. So whatever that particular employer is looking for, or what we need to get from that employer, we can do that at that one time, at that single access point. We can bring multiple experts along with us, but we don't have to, as we've all experienced, transfer them to someone. I'm gonna have Susie call you back, right? So we don't have to do that in the model that we use. And one of the most important things that we do is when we do go into the employers, we make sure that they understand that we are there to provide solutions. We all have customized training and contract training where we're trying to sell a contract or get them on board for a project. We try to focus on solving a problem for them or creating solutions, which helps with the engagement. They return your phone calls when they understand that you're there to help them with the problem. So we try and focus on that as well. So, and I just mentioned contract training. One of the things that we try to do is we try to switch our engagement from transaction-driven to transformation-driven. Organizations want their companies to be transformed. They want their employees to be trained. They want to hire the right people. So that's a major transformation to them. Every time they get a call from us, if we're asking for something, and let's face it, we usually are, right? Every time we call, they're not going to return our calls and they're not going to be engaged with us. So we try and have our advisory committees, our advisory networks, our meetings, our WIB meetings that we go to. We try to focus on the transformation, that we're a partner. We want to help them solve solutions, not that we're trying to sell them a contract. That seems to be the perception a lot of times when we contact them, so we've moved away from that. You absolutely, positively have to speak the employer's language. If you don't speak it, you must get someone that does. I'm responsible for healthcare. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a healthcare practitioner. I know enough to be dangerous in a meeting. But when it's required, I will bring someone along to get that initial engagement or to continue that relationship with them. You have to understand that the employers have goals, they have matrices, they have compass plans, they have strategic plans. If we're not interested in being part of that, you don't bother them. Don't bother them. They have to understand that we are part of that. And as educators, that's really what they're expecting from us. Yes, they know that we want to place our students, but they're expecting a little more from us than, okay, I need to place my 5 students. We have to give more. We have to give them more in that engagement process. And the engagement is a commitment. You don't always have to seal the deal. There are employers you can call and ask for their expertise and really not want anything in return. Just tell them, we know that you're the best in the business for this and we would like you to collaborate on that. And they're perfectly willing to do that and help us. So we know that the internet is possible, we know that emails are possible, are great. We have email campaigns, we have blogs, we have homing pitches, we have all these different technologies. And then we wonder why people don't communicate or engage with us. Whenever possible, face-to-face is the best method. It is just the best method. I have a little thing I do as a manager. If I email you twice and I don't hear from you, I show up at your office. Right, Dean Vassallo?
Yes, you do.
I show up at your office. So you make those appointments and you go and see them. You have to be where they are. If they are at chamber meetings, you have to be there. Someone has to be there to represent not you, but your institution. So when that phone call comes, they're going to respond. It's a two-way process, and this one is really a bone of contention with me. We reach out to employers all the time for their help. We want them to place our students. We want them to buy contract training. We want them to partner into grants. But when they call us, they can't get us. We don't return the phone calls. We don't give them the information that they need. It doesn't work that way. You have to have a reputation of being the person that is providing solutions. The person responsible for doing ITAs or writing training contracts at the One Stop has my cell phone number. If she has a problem anywhere in the college and she can't get a result, she'll contact me. That's the relationship. That's the type of relationship that you want. So it is a two-way process, so please remember that is really important. When they call you, don't transfer them to someone else. Take it upon yourself to get that information and get back to them if you can. That's going to build that relationship for you. And we call something the engagement toolbox. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. I like to say you don't always have to engage at the top level. Sometimes you're better off not engaging at the top level. The decisions have to be made at the top level. You want to engage an employer at every level. The top, the middle, and the bottom. So depending on what group it is or what organization it is, we may have 8 contacts. My instructor will have contacts, my coordinator will have contacts, I will have contacts, the deans will have contacts, so that's something really important. Engagement and dealing with an organization is not one person's responsibility, and you don't want it to be. You want to have multiple layers into that organization, because when that person leaves, what happens? It goes with them. And then when you call, they're like, who are you? What school are you from? You want to have that multi-layer, or that, we call it Plan A, B, and C. And it's a pool process. Everyone must be engaged. Dean Vassallo and I have gone on visits together. I've taken my instructor. So the engagement is a multifaceted thing that you really want to consider, and just don't do it the old way. Just don't do it the old way. Make sure that you get back to people. Make sure that you contact them. Make sure that you give them something for the relationship that they have with you. And don't always be the person that's calling for something. Sometimes you can call and say, I just saw that article in the newspaper about the new wing that you added. That's great. Glad to hear it. And people are very impressed by that. So it's relationship building. I know this is 101 for you, but it's relationship building, and those engagements are going to be really important. Now, one of our employers could not be here, but
I'm Alyssa Meredith, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Atlanticare. Atlanticare is a 5,500 employee health system in southeastern New Jersey with over 90 locations, primarily in the Atlantic County area. We really value our relationship with Atlantic Cape Community College.
Oh, don't worry, I'll play it out.
I'm Alyssa Meredith, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Atlanticare. Atlanticare is a 5,500 employee health system in southeastern New Jersey with over 90 locations, primarily in the Atlantic County area. We really value our relationship with Atlantic Cape Community College. It's a pipeline for us for great talent to be able to hire a variety of tech level, healthcare, clinical type positions. So that relationship's important, and we really enjoy working with them and just the partnership that we have. We're looking not only for the qualifications, but those soft skills as well. So it's the professionalism, the confidence, the kindness, those kinds of things that you're looking for in a really good, strong employee that's going to represent you to our customers and deliver good healthcare. We take students and we interview students from a variety of schools in the area, and what we see with the students from Atlantic Cape Community College is just a different level of professionalism, a different level of eagerness than you see from some of the other career training type schools. These students come out and they're prepared to do the job. Atlantic Cape has worked with us on the content of the education, so they're really qualified to come and do exactly what we need them to do. Atlanticare has kicked off an Atlanticare Scholars Program in partnership with Atlantic Cape Community College to really help our displaced casino employees in the local area so they can have job retraining and be qualified to work in careers in healthcare. So we've partnered to accept a certain number of students in every year into a variety of classes so that they can then become qualified to come back and interview with us for jobs in the future.
So I just want to mention one last thing before Francesca comes up. Alyssa mentioned a scholarship program. So over the last, since 2012, with our relationship with Atlanticare, a couple of things have happened. Because a lot of the casinos closed in Atlantic City, they put some money up to help those folks transition into healthcare. That's the Scholars Program they have. And I think it was about 2 months ago, Atlanticare announced that they have changed their tuition reimbursement program to now include workforce development, or what people refer to as non-credit programs. They never did that before with tuition reimbursement. Not only have they allowed non-credit programming for tuition reimbursement, but only with Atlantic Cape Community College. So that helps to show the type of relationship we have with them. If you want to go to another school and you want to do the tuition reimbursement at 100%, they will not pay for it. You must come to us for that. So that, and they've doubled the amount. It was $4,000 a year, they doubled it to $8,000 a year. So that's just a result of years and years of engagement and relationship with them that they have made that administrative decision to help get the talent that they need. So I'll see you later for questions, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Sherwood. That's awesome. So at LaGuardia Community College, we service about 50,000 students a year. 30,000 of whom actually come from continuing education, a combination of workforce development and pre-college programming. And the only way we're really able to make this work is if we take an integrated approach to career advisement, job readiness, and employer engagement. So we have a central team that works together. Some are specialized more on the employment engagement side, some are specialized more on the career advisement side, and really kind of working with students to embed job readiness in the trainings. But they work together as a team, and not just at the end of the program, right, when students are thinking about employment as kind of an afterthought to the completion of the program. We embed it throughout the program, really starting at the point of intake, assessment, and info sessions. So a career advisor will be there at every info session that we run. They will host workshops along with the kind of technical skills instructors, and they'll do that throughout the course of the training. Again, constantly reinforcing the fact that these are workforce development programs and that the end goal is a job and a career, right? And that we're supporting the students along a career pathway. And as much as possible, we try to engage employers in that process as well. So it's always great when one of our employer partners comes to an info session, helps screen students, and particularly if it's a grant-funded program and we're able to create some sort of an employment pipeline. So we really try to create this integrated approach based on kind of this centralized team-based service model. We also do a lot of coordination with academic affairs and student affairs so that our approach to employer engagement is consistent. At LaGuardia, student affairs manages employment for students who are currently in a degree program and for our alums. And academic affairs manages our internship programs and experiential learning opportunities. So there's the possibility, as you can see, of 3 different offices with 3 different cultures, 3 different approaches to employer engagement, all working at cross purposes, and that's not what we want to do. So the message that we really try to talk to employers about is that we're here to fill whatever need you have. So if an employer comes to me and I'm on the continuing ed side of the house and they are interested in an internship, we'll use that as a way to kind of broaden our approach and connect it to the appropriate party in academic affairs. And the teams actually meet together pretty frequently to make sure that their messaging is consistent, their employer outreach is consistent, and they're not working at cross purposes or competing.
So our starting point for employer engagement really is labor market information. So we try to be very data-driven in our approach to all things program development. We use real-time labor market information. We use 2 different services, MC and Burning Glass, and that helps us identify which employers are hiring and for what occupations. And it helps us strategize our outreach based on NAICS codes. So we really use this as the starting point for all new program development. If we can't identify employers in our area who are hiring, and we can't address whatever hiring needs that they're saying they're needing and that this labor market research is showing, we won't run a program, right? We really want to make sure that our training programs address the needs of our employers in our community, and this is often the starting point to do that research and engagement. We also have the team go out and do a lot of participation in job fairs, business expos, and networking events, because we find that it's very important, as Sherwood mentioned, for staff to be able to speak the language of employers and be able to relate to them in a way that makes sense to them and that's comfortable for them. It's also a good way for the staff to stay ahead of trends, to help kind of identify new programs that we may want to develop, and to develop some of that active presence and engagement with employers in a way that the cold calling may not provide. So typically when we engage employers, it's often around a specific job vacancy or an internship or a particular training need. And either we may make a kind of cold call or take an existing relationship and use that as a starting point, or an employer may hear about a training that we're doing and come to us. But that's actually not the type of model that we want to follow, right? The old job readiness, career job development model, where you had somebody with their Rolodex of contacts and they're kind of calling and their secret stash of employers to fill one job at a time. We just find that model is not efficient, and it doesn't help the students in the long run, and it doesn't help us in the long run. So what we're really trying to do is use this as a starting point for a larger discussion around how we can meet an employer's hiring and talent needs. And we really try to frame it as if we are providing a service to the employers. And that's how we go about starting the initial conversation. What are your pain points? Why are people quitting your jobs? Why are you having trouble filling a position? Is it because people aren't showing up on time? Is it because they're wearing tank tops and flip-flops to work? Is it because they're lacking actual technical expertise? And that really helps us then start to develop the partnership in a way that helps develop an employment pipeline for our students. And once we start that conversation and once we start that partnership, we try to formalize it in some way. This works with some employers more so than others, but we just find that having some sort of a written document just to kind of outline the roles and responsibilities is very helpful, because employers are busy, they're running their own businesses, they have a million things to do. And so having kind of a clear sense at the beginning of the discussion of what a partnership might look like and how they may benefit from it and how they can contribute to the partnership, I think goes a long way to help make the partnership more effective as time goes on. So these are some of the questions that we typically ask employers throughout the process, and I don't think any of them are particularly, mind-blowing in terms of, the type of question, but I will point out a couple of things that we find are really important. So figuring out who the main point of contact is. Sometimes that could be a hiring manager. Sometimes that could be the head of HR. Sometimes that could be an assistant in HR or within the hiring manager's area. It could be multiple people depending on what the project is. You could be working with one employer and have several points of contact depending on what training you're doing. But it's important to understand that, because sometimes, as Sherwood said, you may try to engage somebody at one level and that might not be the right person, and there may be other people within the organization. So really trying to get a sense of who that is at the beginning is helpful. Looking at what skills are most in demand. So we go through a pretty rigorous process trying to understand from employers not just the technical skills, not just the requirements of the job, but how this also translates in soft skills. And when you're thinking about the resiliency competencies, that Meredith mentioned earlier, this is a lot of what we're trying to get at here. We want to make sure that every person that we refer to an employer is job ready and is going to be a superstar at that company. And so the more questions we can ask around skills and competencies, the better. We also try to look at things like hiring projections and cycles. Sometimes it's really easy to just develop a training program based on your own academic calendar or based on the calendar of who's available for a particular period of time. But if you're doing a training program where employment is the end goal and you're working with employers and they have particular hiring cycles, you don't want to end your training program at a time when they're not hiring, right? Because then you're going to have a gap. And so just being really clear about hiring projections and cycles is very important. And then education and certifications, what we find in the community college is that a lot of employers will use a college degree as a screen, right? And they'll say at first, oh, we only accept people with an associate's degree, or we only accept people with a bachelor's degree. But in reality, if we can develop a customized training that meets their employment needs, and we can kind of make that case to them, they'll be more likely to accept a certification from us in lieu of a degree.
Thank you so much. We're going to do a little shuffle, switch places.
So we heard from our presenters, Francesca from LaGuardia Community College and Sherwood from Atlantic Cape Community College, about how they're really reaching out to employers, building trust with employers, and then following through with employers, which is critical. Talked too about labor market information. So labor market information in real time, sometimes from companies like MC or Burning Glass, and also the labor market information that you get from conversations with employers and by asking about hiring cycles, skills and competencies that are needed, and how many prepared workers will be needed. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit and kind of move into more of a panel format. So the first question that I have is, so we are the Northeast Resiliency Consortium, and Northeast Resiliency Consortium colleges have created or enhanced programs of study in 3 sectors. So you'll remember that they're healthcare, energy and environment, and information technology. Both LaGuardia and Atlantic Cape Community College have one sector in common, and that is healthcare. So I'm curious, why is preparing students for healthcare occupations a priority for your institution? And Sherwood, if you and Atlantic Cape could start. Thank you.
For us, it's a priority. Our regional healthcare partners, we have 2 regional healthcare hospitals or medical centers in our area, and with the changes in healthcare, their need for specifically trained folks are very, 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 very high. To the point of one of our last groups that went out on their clinical, they were asked to fill out job applications before they had even sat for their certification exams, because they didn't want them to get away. So for us, it's just expanding unbelievably.
Hi, if I can just jump in, we talk about learning curves and cultural shifts, and I have to be honest with you, if we were sitting here even 3 years ago, and I know Sherwood would agree, I'm not sure if healthcare would be our primary initiative. We come from Atlantic City area, New Jersey, and so obviously for many years, the casino industry dominated a lot of the training initiatives that were desperately needed and sought after in our area. But as many of you know, and I know Sherwood was referring to it with the Atlantic Care Scholars Program, which was initially set up to assist those who were obviously downsized as a result, we've lost 4 major casino properties in Atlantic City with thousands of people unemployed. And so over the last 3 years, we've seen a real shift in industry and employer demand where the casino industry no longer dominates the employer-driven industry, but rather healthcare does. And because Atlantic Cape represents two counties, Atlantic County and Cape May County, both of which have very strong healthcare presence, this was just a natural evolving shift as to the emerging needs of training that resulted as a result of many of the casino closures and the shift in employer-employee demands.
So then a shift in demands and probably in the employers that you're working with as well.
Absolutely.
And so building those new relationships and encouraging them and building that trust must have been really important.
Well, if I could just jump in again. Obviously, Alyssa Bennett, our colleague at Atlantic Care, really said it best. She recognizes that many of these folks were career casino employees. These poor folks had not put a resume together in over 30 years. They maybe didn't even have to sell themselves in a job interview. Their self-confidence was low. Many of them were at mid-plateaus in their careers, 50, 55 years old plus, and questioning, what am I supposed to do now? I'm not ready to retire personally or financially, and I need to find a viable job. I need to work. I need to find employment. And these folks reached out to places like Atlantic Care, and Atlantic Care is reaching out to them to say, hey, we have the jobs available. We know you need the training, and we're here to provide the training. And so these initiatives have really helped all. We've seen our healthcare partners step up and certainly assist because they know there are folks desperately in need of retraining, many of them at late career stages in their lives.
Thank you. And from LaGuardia in New York, so how about healthcare needs there?
So healthcare has always been a very strong training area for us, and I think probably our strongest training area for many years. There are a lot of hospitals and healthcare providers in New York City. We have a lot of people in New York City. So, the demand continues to grow for healthcare workers. I think what we've seen is a little bit more of a shift in the types of skills and competencies that employers are looking for. And so, I think a good example of that is we have a program that we recently started, not part of this initiative, with a hospital provider, and we really thought that there would be kind of this clear career ladder from the very entry-level position into the position that we were looking to train. And what we learned through our research with the employer is that in fact the position we were looking to train had become the entry-level position, and that all of the kind of positions that had happened, that existed prior to that career point had been abolished, right, or had been kind of integrated into other jobs. And so we see that really across the board, and that's why that constant engagement with employers is so important.
Thank you. So really capturing that changing need and having changing your programs to adapt with that. Good. And healthcare again, that is in particular a sector that is critical in responding to emergencies, man-made or natural. And so I just wanted to re-emphasize that connection. So in the video and in my opening comments, I talked a little bit about the Resiliency Competency model. And you have copies of that on your table. It looks like sunshine, it's a colorful picture. And so I mentioned that these competencies, or this competency model was developed by the Northeast Resiliency Consortium. And really, in working with students, faculty, staff, administration, employers, and industry groups. And at this point in time, the Northeast Resiliency Consortium has begun mapping these resiliency competencies to courses within programs of study or into student success courses at institutions. And so now I have a question about, so in developing this competency model, we consulted with employers, but I'm curious how the competency model and how you're talking about the competencies with employers and how it might be resonating with them. How about in Atlantic Cape? How's that?
Once the resiliency competencies began, we started having those preliminary conversations with our employers, and as Alyssa said in her video, our folks are coming in prepared. So it's because we're still doing our trial and embedding it into our curriculum, but a lot of that work was in the curriculum, already based in the curriculum. So our folks are important to them because they're coming with those things already. They don't have to train them on those basic things once they get them. You know, the skill part, proof by example. If you pass a certification, they know you have the skill. But it's those other things, you know, be kind, you know, the other things that they're looking for. And that's really important to them.
And interesting thinking about coming to the employer with these skills already. So employers are not wanting to develop things like critical thinking or collaboration, teamwork. We know that employers are often asking for these types of competencies. And Francesca, I know from conversations we've had, really framing the way you talk about this to employers versus the way you might talk about it to fellow educators is important. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we find to be really important is being able to speak to businesses in their language, right? And I think, you know, in academia, oftentimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. So I know that if I went to my employers and said, we've implemented this resiliency competency model, what do you think about it? You know, I think they're going to be like, what is that? And not want to work with us, right? And so instead, what we really try to do is frame it around the job readiness and soft skills that they already say are problems for hiring and retention. And so instead of saying, you know, we have embedded this resiliency competency model in our pre-hospital care programs, we will say things like our EMTs and paramedics, you know, exhibit these particular skills. So they are reflective learners. They work together in teams and collaborate. You know, they have adaptability, and this is how it's demonstrated. They exhibit critical thinking, and this is how it's demonstrated. And so, you know, we will then kind of refer to the specific points of the competency model and talk about how the work in the curriculum addresses those points and helps make our students good employees based on these kinds of aspects. And that really resonates with employers, I think, in a very strong way.
Good, thank you. So talking about using language that will resonate with employers when talking about these skills and competencies that are in demand. And referring to not just to explaining this competency model in a way that provides some value to employers, but also linking it to the skills that they've been asking for seems really critical here. And so earlier in the conversation, you talked about kind of changing needs, so both changing the skills that are required for jobs and changing the level of entry into jobs and actually changing sectors. So changing from an economy based mostly in employment and casinos to really booming employment opportunities in the healthcare sector. So I'm curious, you know, how do you maintain employer engagement? How do you start something and then keep it going? For example, when a training program ends, when that need ends, and it looks like Donna is interested in this. So.
Yeah, I love this topic. You know, Sherwood said it best when he was down before. This is not something that it's not a one shot, you know, and we're out of here. It's constant relationship building. It is like any other relationship that any one of us in this room has. When people say, you know, I shouldn't have to work at it, show me one relationship where you don't. I mean, and this is no different. So we're constantly working at that relationship building. And I think a lot of this really comes down to a strong level of trust. You know, Sherwood and I have an advantage with many of our partners in Atlantic County in particular, because both of us at one time in previous lives worked in the casino industry. And I worked in human resources in the casino industry. And some of the same folks that I worked literally right next door to at one of my employers is now the VP of HR at one of our hospitals. This happens. Atlantic County seems so large, but in reality, it's a small town. So in many ways, we've been very fortunate that we forged relationships 20 years ago with some of these folks. So even though we've all changed careers and lines of business, we find ourselves, ironically, working together again. And so and most of that, part of relationship building, can I trust this person? Do I know this person? Are they going to stab me in the back? That all has been removed because of the history that we shared. Even with new folks that we're meeting, it's not a matter of just seeing them once. Sherwood identified we were very strong on face-to-face. People are busy, they don't often get back to you via email or phone call, but when you're in front of them, they respond. We know where they're going. We know that they're Rotary members and chamber members, and we know where to find them. We're not nudges and we're not harassing them, but we are there. We're present, and they know where to find us, and we know where to find them. But it's just like any other relationship. It takes time and it takes effort. And they know that we're not just picking up the phone to sell something. We're celebrating with them when they have great successes. We're consoling them when there's some bad news in the local press. We're there. And they like that we just pick up the phone sometimes just to say, hey, I was thinking about you. That's what it takes to maintain those engagement strategies.
Thanks, Donna. Sherwood?
And ultimately, I think you have to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on.
So
if it's all flash and no cash, we've been asked to develop programs by the hospital, and I may do them just a little slower than they would like. But healthcare, as most of you know, is expensive to mount a healthcare program. You want to make sure that the jobs are going to be on the other end, and most importantly for us, qualified instructors is a challenge. So I think delivering on the promise, and when you can't deliver on the promise, you tell them that you cannot. And hopefully give them an alternative, but if you can't, but I think delivering on the promise is one way to keep them engaged with you and keep them calling when something new is coming.
Very important, very important. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think the trust part is really important, and I think being responsive to employers on an ongoing basis. So, what we try to do is at the end of any training program, it's not like the end. We'll then work with the employer to identify what we could have done better, right? We'll follow up with them, 3 months, 6 months out and say, how are our students doing? Are they doing better than your average recruits off the street? What could we do, differently? How could we enhance our curriculum going forward? So we try to include them in a real-time feedback loop that's going to continuously drive improvement in our program. And part of that is being responsive if we get negative feedback, right? Not being defensive, not making excuses, but recognizing that if we're doing a program in partnership with a business and they have concerns or questions or issues, that we want to take that at its value and use it to make improvements in our program. And I think that goes a long way to deepening the relationship and really showing that level of commitment and fostering trust.
Thank you. And so this next question is kind of a pivot question. So after this question, we're going to move into our activity. And the question is, and it kind of tacks on nicely to really thinking about how to engage employers and what to ask them. Can you give some concrete examples of how you work with employers to develop curriculum, and what do you do to engage employers outside of curriculum development?
So what we have a pretty rigorous process. So we have, our centralized career development team, job developers, although we call them employment specialists now, career counselors, and then the subject matter experts within each program. And they will engage the employer through site visits, oftentimes, to try to understand exactly what's going to make somebody a superstar at that company. So they'll meet with the hiring managers, they'll meet with HR, they'll meet with the people who are currently in the job to understand kind of what some of their challenges were, what a day in the life at that company is like, what are some of the supports they wish they had going into the program. And we may even try to ask people who have advanced quickly through the company to get a sense of what their career progression is like and to figure out kind of what makes them successful. And that oftentimes is a day-long activity or a half-a-day activity. We try not to make it too difficult on the employer side because we know that they're busy. But what we really try to sell them on is the fact that this exercise is going to help us develop a curriculum that truly responds to all of their hiring and retention pain points. And then when we develop the curriculum, we often bring in subject matter experts on the continuing ed side of the college. So we bring in people who are working in the field, often as adjuncts to teach the class, so they may be bringing in their own unique perspectives. If we can get an employer to actually contribute an instructor or have somebody from that employer teach the class, that's fantastic. But it doesn't always happen, so it's another way of kind of broadening our network. And then we do a back and forth vetting process of the curriculum so that we're comfortable with it, the employer is comfortable with it. And then we do this feedback loop exercise kind of after the training is over to make sure that anything that we're missing gets included in the next rounds. And I can give you a good example. You know, with one of our employers, we had all of the technical skills down. They were completely satisfied with everything that we were covering. And when it came to the interview part, we found that students weren't making it through the interviews at the kind of success rate we were hoping for. And one of the reasons is that their written skills weren't at the level that the employer was looking for. Many of our students, English is their second language, and it's not something, honestly, that we tested for or embedded as much in the curriculum. And that hurt to hear that from the employer. They obviously weren't as happy as we thought they would be. But we embedded it into the curriculum, and the next time around, we made sure that we screened for it. We made sure we did more exercises that address that and that build those skills. And we're having a much more successful outcome as a result of that.
Thank you. Anything to add from our friends from Atlantic Cape?
For us, the majority of our training programs are what we call our open enrollment, so anyone can sign up for them. The employers are looking to hire folks right out of those. So we do take input from the employers on touch points in the curriculum they can do. We have to be careful because all of our programs are certification based, so you can only change it so much. And what you will find in these conversations with the employers is, well, I want this, and well, my people don't do that. So take that out, and you can't do that because those particular skill points are part of the certification, and they have to be in the curriculum. And once you explain that to them, they seem to understand it. So that's something really important to remember. When you do engage the employer, they want to make it theirs.
Right.
And if you have multiple employers, but you have to, if it's a certification-based program, you have to follow the requirements of that certification. So you want to be careful.
That's a really important point there. So thinking about the best way to engage employers and getting their feedback in a way that can be actionable is critical there. So we're going to move into the activity portion of today's session. And so on your tables, you have something that looks like a chart. Make sure that you're at a table that has one of those. And Francesca is going to describe the activity.
Yeah, so what we really wanted to do is give each of you a chance to kind of think about, on an individual level and then with the other members of your team, what some of the successful strategies you've experienced at your institution, and then what some of those challenges are, right? We all know that engaging employers is a difficult, sometimes process, and it can take a long time. So, you can each take maybe a couple of minutes just to kind of jot down some notes on some successful strategies and challenges, and then move on to discussing within your table, and then we can do a little bit reporting out and question and answer.
Anyone have any questions? Sherwood is offered to get, you've got it.
Yes,
Sherwood, right there. He's coming.
He's got the better.
I don't move like that, but
Okay, so I didn't hear too much about the lessons of student resiliency. So I was wondering, and I was with two of your colleagues, and I was wondering how did you measure that? So because the title of the presentation was about how lessons of student resiliency can translate, and I heard more about your relationship with the workforce. So my question was about students. So when you were recruiting those students who came from a different industry, did they already have those resilience attributes that you talk about in your model? Did you mention that before?
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, I wanted to hear more about that part rather than the working.
Okay, so I can talk about kind of our experience at LaGuardia. So we kind of do a screen screening and assessment at the very beginning of our training programs. And one of the things that we assess students on is their ability to persist in the program. So the concept of resiliency is really embedded right at the very beginning. So we have students come in for multiple info sessions and multiple kind of tape tests, interviews. We want to make sure that it's not easy for them to enroll in the program. So that's one of the ways that we're able to really measure persistence and resiliency from the beginning of the training program. And we have, our students all have difficult lives, right? So in these training models, we do very extensive support services to work with students, again, to kind of embed that personal resiliency and help them manage whatever the challenges and difficulties they have in their lives that could potentially be a barrier to employment. So I think that's another way that we're able to embed resiliency into the curriculum and into the coursework. And then I think, looking at the actual curricular topics themselves, at LaGuardia, one of the things that we've actually been able to do through this grant for our pre-hospital care programs is do what we're calling a psychological trauma prevention program. So our healthcare programs through this project are EMT and paramedic. And if you think of a first responder, they're the first person that somebody in crisis is going to see, right? And so there's that has an impact on the worker because they could be seeing a potentially traumatic thing and not just a one-time incident, but that then becomes part of their job is dealing with trauma. And it can be, and the person who is kind of in crisis is experiencing trauma as well, right? So what we've embedded in our curriculum, and we've developed this through grant funding for the project, is a module that helps the first responders while they're in the training, helps them understand that they're actually working with a person who's in trauma. So instead of an EMT or a paramedic coming to the scene of some sort of crisis and just like flashing a light in somebody's eye or moving them onto a stretcher, it's really empowering the worker to recognize that they're working with a person who is in crisis, and that there's a way to kind of approach that person to minimize the trauma and to help instill resiliency in that person. We call that model escape. So it's helping having the patient anticipate what's going to happen, helping them have the role planning, having compassion for the person who's in this process. And what we found is that it's not only helps reduce the trauma of the person who's in the crisis, so simple things like saying to them, I'm going to lift your arm now, is that okay? Please let me know if you're feeling discomfort, as opposed to just lifting their arm to see if there's a problem, right? We found that this not only helps improve the resiliency of the person in the crisis, but it's actually made our students more resilient because they're better able to cope with a lot of the trauma that they're seeing as part of the job. So, and this is something that we're hearing from employers, and it's something that we've built in with our employer feedback. So employers now want to hire our students who've gone through this training with this add-on because they recognize that it's going to go a long way towards preventing burnout, from improving the customer service experience, and just making the overall kind of quality of care improve. So I think that's kind of a really nice example of how we're embedding student resiliency throughout the process, but again, linked to feedback from employers.
If I can just jump in, I certainly want to share, and we've talked about, and I thank you for identifying, especially those students who are coming in from a different line of business, and how are they going to maintain, and how do they view resiliency. And I think what we need to understand about those students is first we need to build their self-confidence, especially when they're looking at a different career choice, regardless of what age range they may be. The other thing is helping them to recognize the transferability of those skills. That's what I think is probably the biggest challenge, not only in workforce development, but certainly on the academic side of our house as well. Many of these students don't recognize these 5 resiliencies they've probably mastered in a previous job. They just don't know how to articulate that. What does that look like? And so regardless of the job or jobs they may have been coming from, even if it was a homemaker, which we all know is probably the hardest job there is out there, they've all probably at one time or another mastered these resiliencies, but I think Francesca said it best earlier, they don't call them that. They don't, just like the employer, what do you mean by resiliencies? The employer might call these values, right? I mean, many of them know these as values. They're not going to know them as resiliencies. Well, the student doesn't know them as resiliencies either, but they're transferable skills that they've learned at some point in their career. They're just transferring them to a different career.
Other questions?
You know, I understand very well how you get buy-in from employers for this, and I also understand how you get buy-in from faculty in the healthcare industry. Our institution has 13 allied health programs, and this kind of thing is truly embedded in the curriculum. But how do you get buy-in for faculty in the other sectors that you worked in IT and energy, that these competencies need to be embedded in their curriculum? Are you there yet?
Getting there. I can say, and I think our panelists may be able to add a little bit, in terms of giving instructor buy-in, it's something that Ed Fines, who's actually in the audience, has worked very closely with project directors at each of the institutions that are part of the Northeast Resiliency Consortium, and really has spent the time to sit with them, talk on the phone with them, really talk about what their courses are, what the activities are in those courses, what the content is, and how it may align with these competencies, or how different activities can be developed so that then they would build a student's competency in one of these areas.
It's so ironic you mentioned that, because IT is actually one of our superstar, areas that it's almost like they kind of came to me, telling me.
So for creating do we have more work for you from the consortium?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have this stuff mapped out. Again, IT, there's probably the largest number of courses mapped with these competencies where they are embedding this stuff, and they've told us the employers that want our students need this stuff because it is information technology. So it was just funny that you sort of framed it that way. Yeah, absolutely.
Also being mapped to freshman seminar orientation type courses, which is a great place to start with these resiliency competencies.
Thanks. I like the audience engagement piece. More questions? No? Ideas about how you might apply this when you get back to your institution? Anything from the session? How you might apply it in the new drone program? Sure, absolutely. So we're curious from the activity, you listed some things that were going well and some of the challenges that you are having in engaging employers. And I'm curious if we have a few volunteers who might share that.
I think that you mentioned before that there are requirements for certifications that can't be adjusted because your states require that. And that becomes a problem sometimes with employers who are wanting to customize certain skills for their employees. That also becomes problematic for the institution because where do we put these programs? Are they going to be certificates where we have to have certain components, or do we want to put them in our institution, we're going to put them into like continuing education that is not a certificate from the state, but rather something that can be more customized, non-credit bearing. Well, if we do that, then we have issues with funding and financial aid for students. So it becomes a place where for students to get what they need to meet the employer's needs, if we go around the issue of certificates, then there's an issue of not being able to use any type of aid for students to pay for that. So that's kind of where we are in some of the areas as we try to develop new programs and needs for employers.
One of the things I would suggest is the continuing ed and workforce development side work with the credit side, because if there is a certification requirement that a degree program needs, you don't have to recreate it on that side. Use the certification side on CE or workforce development. And for most of the hospitals, everything they want is certification based.
Hospitals are separate in a way because, hospitals for us,
Okay.
it's not like in the state and also in Tennessee. So we have those excellent partnerships. All these competencies are embedded. They're all taken care of. But we're looking at new things like cybersecurity or something that's a little bit different and unique that might not require a true certification from the state that has like some of the English requirements or whatnot, but more of a customized one.
Right.
And so that's where we get into a sticky situation.
One of the things that we do at LaGuardia, so we offer a lot of different non-accredited training programs, some of which are tied to a certification, but many of which are not. And the model that we found to be pretty successful in terms of starting programs and then gaining traction is offering a version of it as a pilot and maybe charging tuition for students. And then you have a cohort or maybe two cohorts that you can then demonstrate success from, right? And that is very powerful in terms of going for grant funding, particularly if you have a strong employer partner already. In some of our employer partners, and I think Sherwood mentioned in his example as well, the employer may offer tuition assistance, they may chip in a scholarship or a portion of the tuition, right, as a way of kind of encouraging students to apply. It's another way of kind of bringing in really strong candidates is, you can have them apply for a scholarship, but that's something that's available. But we found it to be a really successful way of piloting programs and making modifications to a training and then being able to demonstrate success. And like I said, if you have a strong employer partner or a couple of employer partners and you have the beginnings of a program and you can demonstrate good outcomes, I think it goes a long way in terms of competitiveness for future funding.
So, any last questions before? Yes?
Erica?
Well, I just wanted to share that, when working with employers, one of the things that we've noticed is that they're very, very busy people. And so it's a double-edged sword almost. I mean, when you go to meet with them, you better be ready to tell them exactly what it is that you're talking about and what your goals are so that they can act on it, because they really are action-oriented type people. So for us, it's a matter of making sure our little ducks are in place before we even start talking to them. But I also have a question. I heard earlier that you said something about having some kind of an assessment tool to see the level of resilience. And are you willing to share the name of that tool with us?
So we don't have, it's not a formal tool like it's, I think we can probably share some of our assessment materials. We embed it within the overall assessment, and then part of the assessment design itself also tests resiliency. So we have students come back from multiple appointments, and like if they can't make an appointment, then we know they're probably not going to be able to make the class, right? Or if they're showing up late, or if they're showing up with unprofessional dress. So not only do we kind of screen for the assessment, we screen for resiliency kind of through some of our questions and through some of our interviewing, but we embed it within the program design, and I think that's something that we found to be really successful. But yeah, any kind of assessment materials we have, we'd be happy to share.
And I would add that the Northeast Resiliency Consortium has worked with, basically with a test designer to design a pre and a post test for students who are enrolled in these courses, and that's part of the way that we're building some evidence around the resiliency competencies and whether courses that have these competencies in them are actually developing students' competencies in these areas. So sharing those pre and post tests is something that we could do as well. All right. Well, we thank you so much for joining today's session on resiliency. And I do want to share that Paul Casey, who is the director of the Northeast Resiliency Consortium, is here. I'd like to raise his hand. And so folks are welcome to follow up with Paul Casey. I have his business card here. Or with any of our panelists after today's session. We welcome questions, comments, feedback, good or bad, and thank you for joining today's session.